All right, click the links to join the channel here over at SubScribestar. So Leslye Headland declares that people opposed to wokeness are not true Star Wars fans. Yeah, Leslye Headland, that name sounds familiar. Isn't she tied into Weinstein or something? Was she working with him when he was... Oh, yeah, I think that is the same Leslye Headland. Thank God you have the moral high ground. Plot twist, nobody in Hollywood has the moral high ground. The people who applauded Weinstein for decades, as long as their pockets were getting lined. So Leslye Headland, Kathleen Kennedy, and a Star Wars acolyte, I guess, are in the news. Star Wars has got, I don't know, more than a half a dozen streaming shows on the Disney Plus network, and I don't think anyone watches them. They watched The Mandalorian. That connected with people for a few months, and then everything just kind of went. I think if someone's going to write a book a few decades from now about the collapse of Disney, that might be one point that they'll look. They go, you know what? The Mandalorian was that they could have turned it around after the disappointment in the Disney Star Wars, and then Solo bombed. The Mandalorian was their chance. They got the audience, and then they fired Gina Carano, and people were like, you know what? This is just F these people. So what happened is they have this new show that is, I mean, there's like Andor and Acolyte, and I can't, all I remember is the Mando, and there's a bunch of others, and it's just, nobody is watching this stuff. So they're trying to get out ahead of what's going to happen with this show and attack the customers. They call them the fans. It's like, you got to stop thinking of people as fans. Think of people as customers. Because when you think of people as fans, you think, oh, well, they'll accept almost anything you throw at them because they're fans. Like, no, these are customers. You need them to subscribe to that Disney Plus thing. And they, so she's calling the fans, I guess, sexy and istophobic or something, with, you know, a feminist straw man of, if you don't like woke propaganda, you're istophobic. What's that chick? If you don't like my politics, don't buy my comic books. I don't remember the name of her. And then, you know, a couple years later, predictable, what happens? She does the interview, and it's like, yeah, the comic industry's really in trouble. I wonder why. Which is interesting to call people istophobic, because, I mean, people just don't care, but they also don't want to be... From the left-wing perception, it's an insult to call somebody that. Most people now are just caring less and less because they're calling literally everyone that. It's just like the witch finders in an African tribe are smelling out the witches in the Shaka Zulu tales. It doesn't get butts in theater seats, and it doesn't get customers to subscribe to Disney Plus, and it doesn't get a view count for these shows. Now, a normie might think, well, maybe this attacking the customers, it gets the left-wingers by drawing attention, and that might be true for a little while. It might get a little bit, but it's not enough. You have to have something that connects with an audience, and for some wacky reason, the left-wing just... They always say this phrase I see on Twitter, and every time I see it, somebody comes out with some stupid woke idea, and there'll be a bunch of people who's like, I can't wait to watch that, or shut up and take my money. And then 6 months later, when the thing comes out, oh, I guess I was... So what happened with, I don't know, the female Terminator that was a bomb? Oh, yeah, I guess we're just busy that way. Oh, Ghostbusters 2016, yeah, all tied up. I mean, there's like a half a dozen of these very famous feminist examples, and the audience just doesn't show up for them. What do they show up for? Barbie. Why? Because it was two beautiful blonde-haired people engaged, indulged in themselves in some feminist fantasy for sure, but it was also two very beautiful, you know, Nordic central casting. So the thing is, I'm starting to wonder if the view hours and the streaming profit really doesn't matter, that they're not the issue, that there is some other issue going on. You heard the phrase, the purpose of the thing is what it does. Well, unless they're incompetent, and the jury, to be fair, is still out on that, what they're doing is fomenting racial and sexual discord. That's the analysis of what is objectively actually happening, and that's easy to analyze. The more complicated issue is why they're willing to do this expensive social engineering experiment. And sometimes I think, you know, it's because they're globalist lizard people. I think there's a lot of incompetence also thrown in there because, gentlemen, I regret to inform you, women. So I was on Odyssey last night. I was listening to my favorite streamer, Drilla, and for some reason, the next video in the queue was an hour-long outtakes and cuts from George Lucas's Star Wars, and it turns out that The New Hope had a ton of scenes that were cut. Otherwise, the film would have been way too long, and it was good to cut the scenes with, in the beginning of the movie, it showed Luke and his friends at, not the academy, but at wherever it was they hung out at one of the cantinas, because it brought the focus off of Luke, and the way the released version was, it portrayed Luke as a little bit isolated out in the middle of the desert, farming whatever, vape farmers or something. So The New Hope was a tight, fast movie where it kept the story moving, and it was a movie about war. And here's the Lucas line. And there's this interview where some commie douchebag asks Lucas about more women in Star Wars, and that's his answer. In a movie about war, there's not going to be many women, and the Lucas trilogy worked. You assume this was a galaxy far away. They had battles, but it's still men that are going to be fighting them, because men are not women. Men are biologically expendable when it comes time to repopulate the tribe if they're at war. There's so much that worked when he was putting this thing together, I guess in 1975, and there's so much that fails in Disney Star Wars. The cognitive dissonance of women acting or trying to act like men, being put in positions of men, none of it makes sense. It feels like LARPing, where women are trying to they're trying to be what they think men are, but they don't understand what a man is. So it comes across as just a woman thinks a guy has to have a silver chain and a, what do you call that, duck's peaked haircut, because they're usually short, and a jeans jacket and a leather vest or something. It's just a stereotype of what they think some 1950s guy is. They just don't understand. They're always like 50 pounds overweight, so they just you just look like kind of a short, pudgy woman who cut her hair short. So the willing suspension of disbelief does not encompass a woman in her fertility window, who takes years to train in the ways of war, then going off to risk her life and future offspring in war. None of that makes sense, and that's why throughout human history, it's pretty rare that you see a situation like that, unless you're at such dire straits that it's total war and you're going to be deleted anyway. Because who is making the babies if the women are at war? What happens to the next generation? Well, they'll just go extinct or be replaced by a new group of outsiders, which would then beg the question, then what are you even fighting for? It'd be better to run off and go somewhere else. Disney is woke and trying to push propaganda, much of which focuses on the anti-natal, anti-birth movement, which is demonic. And people have picked up on this dark vibe coming from Disney. Why would women go off to war so the man can stay home and raise the kids? None of that makes sense. One man, one energetic man, who hopefully stays well hydrated, and 100 women can repopulate a tribe, but one woman and 100 men can't. It would take several generations to get enough women to you get the idea. This is ingrained in us. We know it's ridiculous to see women in action roles. In the interview, Headland is saying that Star Wars is political, and they say this shit about comics and movies and everything. It's always been political, which, to be fair, almost everything is, I think, but everyone was on board with the original Star Wars. Star Wars was a huge success, and if you're, it was a little bit before my time to see what success it was. You probably have to be in your 60s now to have kind of lived through it when you're, I don't know, like over 10 or something. It was a movie that people talked about, like, you gotta see this. It's a science fiction movie, but it's done on a high budget, and it's really good. And people, it was one of those movies, like, you have a hit, like, who's that guy? The guy that wrote the Walking Dead comic. I'm staring up on the bookshelf. I got 2 of these books. Honestly, I should give them away to somebody. Where you sell something, and every week after the numbers go up. because that's not how movies work. It's like you have a big opening and then it just slowly declines, and that's just expected. But Star Wars was different, as was The Walking Dead, where it just something, you've got something very rare with that. And Spielberg's Jaws was kind of the same time period, the same way, because I know they were talking back and forth. There's a ton of behind the scenes Star Wars videos on YouTube, but a lot of the good stuff has got to be on BitChute and Odyssey because of copyright issues. Everyone was on board original Star Wars. It had a huge audience, and people didn't walk out complaining that, oh, you know what, this was just too far left or right. It was really kind of preachy, because it was a group of people against a tyrannical regime, which is a pretty standard story idea, but it was still male soldiers fighting other men, as war has always been. The willing suspension of disbelief didn't journey into the absurd territory, and it was still tribal. People looked like they belonged together and weren't just checking a Klaus Schwab or Larry Fink diversity box, which is a problem with modern Disney. They push globalist propaganda because that is who they are, but they're not taking the audience with them because propaganda is lame and obvious. Women writing, directing, or having action roles doesn't work for stories like this. A story, I think, is always going to have to be told from a perspective, a human perspective, because otherwise it would be like a found story, like if you followed a badger around and you filmed a day in the river life. But human stories have bias, and Disney is coming from a far left-wing toxic bias. The audience might be biased to the right of center slightly, such that they focus on blood, kin, and tribe and patriarchy and want to see stories that honor that right-hand path. So you lose them as an audience when you do this new woke stuff. But the weird thing is, Disney didn't pick up the left wing or the vagina enjoyers audience like they do with chick flicks, because Star Wars is a male brand. So they end up making movies for nobody. Males and right of center don't want this stuff, and since it's not pretty Barbie blonde girls in pink, women don't watch it. And Disney is perfectly fine making these streaming shows that they know are going to fail. And when I said that Disney doesn't care about the money or the canon or respect the story, people think I'm a little tinfoil hat. But the purpose of the thing is what it does. And Hollywood has been doing this social engineering thing for a long time now, and it's been losing money. And they keep putting chicks in things, pushing diversity, and making them lame. At some point, the Sherlock Holmes line makes sense, where I forget what you could have paused the video and look it up. I know, where you exclude everything else and you're left with the conclusion that you got to focus on. The conclusion would be the evil globalists are pulling the string for a religious purpose, to push a narrative and screw the shareholders, or even the art, which is admittedly a secondary consideration, but it's still in there. The other interesting thing is how angry the SJW soy boys are in their defense of Disney's woke propaganda. They immediately personally attack you because in their mind, they've been brainwashed to think Islamophobicism is the greatest evil on earth. Even if they can't define it without Google, and they can't, they don't know what they're talking about. They're Mao's useful idiot children who've been trained to have emotional responses. They don't think. They don't know how to think. They've been convinced that you can do anything if it's in the name of fighting Islamophobicism, but they don't really know why. The media told them that it's bad, and they trust the media and government, which is a new left-wing one that I am not familiar with. There's the communist useful idiots who will turn in their parents for wrongthink. These are generations of kids who've been raised by a few earlier generations, also brainwashed by globalist media propaganda. Free thinking and diversity of thought are far right-wing dog whistles to them, but they can't define far right-wing. They can't define almost anything because they're not thinking for themselves. They're just repeating media talking points. And Disney is they know corporate America is on their side when BLM is funded by Bank of America and Soros and Schwab and all these type of things, and they know Disney has this far left wing toxic agenda. Who is that black guy goes, I don't care what happens to me in the industry. He stands up on a chair and goes, but BLM. It's like, yeah, every industry is flying that flag. Like, you really think you did something? You really think you'd be doing something if you said, you know what, all lives matter. That would be doing something. These people are so deep in an echo chamber. They think they're, they're stunning and brave. So If you challenge their dogma by asking questions, their mind just goes into vapor lock. I tell them that Star Wars should look like the 77 original Star Wars, and they can't comprehend such a dinosaur level of thinking, except it's perfectly rational to just say, continue the vibe that Lucas created. Updating it for a globalist standard destroys it. And the proof is in the very low view numbers for Disney Plus. And the easier to look at Solo. Solo lost money. That's a Disney. You couldn't hide those numbers because people just can go the Disney Plus streaming stuff. You can hide that stuff. But one way to talk about it, to analyze it, is look at what the buzz is on social media about the Disney streaming, and there is none. So Disney streaming is Disney Plus Star Wars. That universe is pretty much over, which for Disney is an issue because they have a lot tied into it. And for them to pivot away from it or put it on the shelf, it's like, you could just not make woke stuff. Well, they're not going to do that. People, who is that guy? I forget. There's some YouTubers always talking about the YouTubers just do this stupidest stuff for infotainment, clickbait. And it's like you gotta know it's just clickbait. Talking about like Kathleen Kennedy and YouTube or Star Wars is going to change and someone's going to get fired. It's like, no, they know, no, that you've been saying that for like 10 years, 5 years. Disney Star Wars is like, that was 2015, so it's it's been a while. It feels like that was almost just yesterday when they came out with that very disappointing movie. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next episode.